Is there anything you would have done differently?
We reported a true story.
Our colleague Brian Williams is back in Kuwait City tonight after a close call in the skies over Iraq.
Controversial Supreme Court nominee Brett Kavanaugh and questions about Kavanaugh's drinking in the past.
Sean Hannity, come on up, Sean Hannity.
Today, Andrew Cuomo is having a moment.
Hi, I'm Chris Steyerwalt.
And I'm Eliana Johnson.
Welcome to Einstein Wretches, where we break down what's going wrong and what's going right with the American news media. And Eliana Johnson, whatever's going wrong or right, there is a lot of it. I can tell you, as I speak to you from New York City, which is where obviously you go to cover the Democratic National Convention in Chicago, there is a lot of content going down in the American news media this week. How are you? How's life in Washington, D.C.? Do you all miss me?
You are deeply missed. Your absence is felt keenly. Yeah.
Good. That's all I want to make sure of.
Barely surviving.
That's what I was hoping.
Should we hop to our front page of coverage from the Democratic National Convention? Main takeaway from this convention, is Republicans just cannot compete with Democrats on the celebrity front. Oprah Winfrey, John Legend,
Little John,
whatever DJ they had while they were doing that roll call, dance party roll call, Stevie Wonder, pretty impressive showing of celebrity power.
But for me, it was when Little John introduced the Georgia delegation with from the VP to the walls. I said, okay, they're going for it. They're not hiding their light under a bushel.
Yeah. Chris, Politico writes they covered the Obama speeches, which took place on Tuesday evening, back to back. Michelle Obama introducing Barack Obama, that the Obamas took the crowd to new heights. And they say Michelle and Barack Obama sent an already charged up crowd into pure euphoria. The former president and his wife, still two of the most popular figures in the Democratic Party, have long been known as powerful orators, but their speeches tonight sounded different from past years. And they note that particularly Michelle Obama, who obviously was known for saying, when they go low, we go high, she went low. And they were ready to get vicious with Donald Trump. What did you make of the speeches?
Well, the first night, Joe Biden completed his speech. So the best thing that we could say for Joe Biden is he did not disqualify himself, I guess, from serving out his term as president. They had him in, and there's an interesting, there's 20 million or so people watching at home, which is for TV a lot these days, right? The most significant effect of a convention isn't who's watching, because who is watching this that's not a Democrat already, right? Who are the people, just as with the Republicans, who are the people that are tuning in that are undecided or persuadable voters that say, let me just, and not to say that there aren't any, but that this is a partisan event, not just for the many thousands of people in the hall, but for the millions of people watching at home. This is I assume an overwhelmingly Democratic audience. The media significance is then what filters through, sort of like with a presidential debate, what filters through the next day, what's on the Today Show, what squeezes through to touch that 5 to 15% of the electorate that is persuadable. And the decision to put Joe Biden and Tim Walz last, right? Having them late in the night.
Joe Biden spoke at about 1 a.m, and they clearly did not want him to be seen.
I think he appeared later. It wasn't 1, but it was after midnight by the time he was finished. And I don't think they meant for him to go that late, but I don't think they meant for him to be in prime time. I think
No.
I think the decision very
Nope.
clearly was for him to push him late. And we have the psychodrama about Biden. Is Biden snubbing them, or are they snubbing Biden, or whatever? He's leaving for a vacation, and all of the drama.
They're snubbing Biden. I'm not
Right.
wondering about that. And can I just to expand on that a little bit? The Obama's speeches, there's clearly no love lost, particularly between Michelle Obama and Joe Biden. In her speech, she talked about the present as if we are living in some kind of hellscape. You would have no idea there's a Democratic president. In particular, she said, I pulled a couple lines up from that speech. She said, America, hope is making a comeback. Yeah, but to be honest, I'm realizing that until recently I have mourned the dimming of that hope. And maybe you've experienced the same feelings. That deep pit in my stomach, a palpable sense of dread about the future.
But other than that, Joe is doing great.
Yeah,
Other
other
than
than
that,
that,
he's
the
doing great.
Biden years have been wonderful. And she really came in strong for Harris. So she really shivved Biden.
Yeah, the drama around. So the motif of the convention, and we're recording this on Thursday morning before Kamala Harris gives her speech, but the motif of the convention so far has been change, has been the generational shift. And by the way, that's what Democrats have. The number one thing Democrats have going in their favor is generational shift. And we had a succession of young presidents in the United States. We had Bill Clinton, who is still younger than Donald Trump. We had George W. Bush, and we had Barack Obama, all young men, relatively speaking. Certainly Bill Clinton and Barack Obama, but George W. Bush also, I think, was about 50 or so when he became president. So on the younger side for a series. And now we've had the two oldest presidents back to back that we've ever had. And the desire for change, the desire for newness is what the Democrats have going for them. And I found Bill Clinton's speech remarkable. So here's Bill Clinton, this complicated figure in the Democratic Party story. He was the man from hope long ago, and he was about generational change in 1992. He became a pariah among Democrats for a couple of reasons. One, the sense of betrayal by many progressives. But then, of course, as Me Too movement picked up steam, it became obvious that what they had allowed him to get away with and do was totally unacceptable. And in 2020, Bill Clinton was a marginalized, not quite a pariah, but a marginalized figure. And I watched Bill Clinton on Wednesday night. He talked about being old. He talked about dying. He talked about sort of the end of the line. And I thought, how good for the Democrats. Hillary Clinton's speech was terrible. How good for the Democrats that they're finally, after 40 years, getting free of the Clintons. And Bill Clinton's sense of the moment to know that that's sort of what he was there to do was to leave. And I thought that was all interesting.
Well, not sure Politico saw it that way because their coverage was Hillary Clinton gets her Trump revenge moment. And they write about her speech, Hillary Clinton is finally getting one form of revenge on Donald Trump. The former Secretary of State used her primetime speech at the Democratic National Convention to rip into her former presidential rival as a selfish criminal who Democrats now have on the run against Vice President Kamala Harris. This is just complete wish casting. This is not revenge against Donald Trump. And I'm sure she is resentful to in every last inch of her body that it is somebody else and not her who may defeat Donald Trump.
It was such a good moment to reflect on how bad a candidate Hillary Clinton had been.
Yeah.
And what an emphasis on self it was for her, not to go too deep in the Clintonology, but her terrible campaigns in 2008 and 2016 and how we remember what her slogan was. I'm with her. Really? How about she's with you? You got anything on that? Or are we supposed to be with her? And Hillary Clinton gave the kind of, and she just grinding on about the highest, hardest glass ceiling metaphor that she embraced in her 2008 defeat speech at the Democratic Convention. If you want, and Barack Obama knew this very well about being the first non-white president, was let somebody else say it. You don't say it. And we'll see how Kamala Harris does with it.
She's doing this, by the way. She's not talking about being the first woman president.
Yep, she is not making history, right? She's not. She's letting other people do it, and the media is very enthusiastically doing it for her. She doesn't need to do it. She's being cool about it in the way that Obama was cool about being an African American candidate, and Hillary Clinton is just like the relief. I shouldn't feel this way as a journalist, but I have felt relief this week, realizing that dealing with the Clintons and their rich friends and their machinations inside the Democratic Party and all of that they've done, that has throughout my vocational life been one of the major storylines of the Democratic Party, that it may finally be over. It may finally be over.
Chris, this really should have been my favorite story of the week. In an interview at the Democratic Convention, Anita Dunn sat down with Politico, and she talked about sort of her parting words when she left the White House. And it was essentially like what I viewed as a rote set of remarks, where she told White House aides that revenge is a dish best served cold, and remember the Godfather, and you can't let your emotions dictate like when you get back at your enemies. You got to be cool-headed about these things. And the Politico coverage of this indicated that White House aides were shell-shocked. They couldn't believe what she said. They all went and watched The Godfather over the weekend. It was amazing.
Well, I was amazed by this because so the line is, she says, it's a reference. I believe she even references Luca Brasi from The Godfather. Here it is. You don't need to go get revenge right away. You can pick your time. She says, don't forget the one who brings you the meeting with Barzini. And what on earth? Donald Trump wants to be a gangster. He is a pretend gangster who loves sort of these trappings of, they call him the boss and the da-da-da-da-da and all that stuff, and about getting revenge. And it's stupid. It's un-American. It's wrong. It's unworthy. And Anita Dunn, having been marginalized and so she's an Obama person, but she's a fixture of Democratic Washington. She became a Biden person. She was like one of the last, when they were trying to push Biden out, she was one of the two people in the room, Donilyn Dunn, her husband's Biden's lawyer in many of these cases, Bob Bauer. So she's been very close to Biden over the past 3.5 years. And the idea that she would talk about revenge and talk about punishing the people who harm you is crummy. Oh, I didn't think. Come on. Like, what? Really? Yes. No, I didn't think so at all. I thought this is how we all live and this is how we all think. It's politics. It is so it's so dumb to compare yourself to a mob family about how you're going to get your revenge. It's so dumb, and it is so counterproductive. And I just think for this little clack of Biden people who are like, oh, we'll get him. We're going to get them all back. and you can see the next agony of the Democratic Party. You can see the Democrats are finishing one cycle of pain, one long cycle of pain that has its roots in the conflict between the Clintons and the Obamas, and the Obamas won basically. The net is the Obamas won. The elevation of Kamala Harris
and
as
Pelosi.
Yes.
The Obama-Pelosi nexus.
Yes, and because they did have the good, strong help of Nancy Pelosi, but that faction of the Democratic Party won, and the Clinton faction was routed. And it's so great for Democrats that that's over. And here's Anita Dunn saying, "We'll be back. I'll be back. I have my new grievances now, and I will come back and do it." And I find it when adults compare themselves to fictional mobsters is one of my pet peeves.
Do you think it says a lot about me that I thought the White House aides were freaks to be shocked by that?
Well, I thought it was unfortunate that the White House aides were like, "Ooh, cool. We're going to go watch The Godfather."
They didn't say cool. They were shell shocked by what she said.
Well, they all went and watched The Godfather.
They went and watched The Godfather because they didn't know what she was talking about. But yeah, we'll mark this down as, the only time I'll probably ever defend Anita Dunn. Anita, I'm with you, girl.
Well, revenge is not a dish best served cold. Revenge is a dish best not served. It is a keep it off the menu.
All right. Up next, we have
speaking of bad feelings,
unhinged lunatics. Yeah. Morning Joe fixture, Mike Barnicle shouting expletives. I would say them, but Chris would tut me. Exploding at a former top Obama White House official over the same sort of thing. Over he's a Biden stan, so he crossed paths with a former Obama White House official over the weekend. And that person was expressing glee that Joe Biden had stepped down. And Barnicle, a longtime friend and vocal supporter of Biden, responded when the guy said, "Isn't it great that effing guy finally figured out he had to quit?" And Barnicle said, "What guy?" And the person replied, "Joe Biden." And Barnicle replied, "You know something? F you. And F all your friends with their anonymous quotes in the papers. Put your name on it next time." According to Axios, the story made its way to Biden, who reportedly couldn't contain his laughter. A source familiar with Biden's reaction told the outlet he might still be laughing. Okay. I mean, if I were Biden, I would find that amusing too. But I mean, dude.
Joe Biden's considerable ego. One wonders. So he's at some billionaire's vacation home while this is going on. And you sort of picture the elderly Joe Biden watching this all play out and watch basically dancing on his political grave, right? The enthusiasm among Democrats that he is gone. And many people have said many nice things about Joe Biden. Barack Obama had a lot of nice things to say. People have had a lot of nice things to say about Joe Biden. "We love Joe," they chant, or "Thank you, Joe," they chant. But man, for a guy with an ego the size of Biden's, that must be a embittering experience to watch his party jubilate at his demise.
I get it, but I'm also a little confused by it. Like, they want to win. And I guess Biden's view is he could have won, but what a delusional fool.
Well, that is the number one theme. If we're going to say what's the theme of the Democratic Party in this week of August in the year of our Lord 2024, is they want to win. they want to win. And before we turn to what they're willing to do to win and where their heads are at, we should acknowledge this item on Nancy Pelosi's hot dog taste, because I don't want to blow past any items on hot dogs.
Hit me, because I don't care.
Well, this must be from Colin then. Nancy Pelosi, this is a tweet. Nancy Pelosi, a hot dog aficionado, gives a somewhat tepid take on the Chicago dog. "I had one last night. It was good. It was good. The Speaker Emerita." Don't call her Speaker Emerita. There is not such a thing as a Speaker Emerita. She's the former Speaker. says it's the only thing she's eaten so far in the Windy City.
Yo, do you think they're out there like referring to Newt Gingrich as the Speaker Emeritus?
I think the Democrats made up this title for her, Speaker Emerita. Just the former speaker will do fine. She also, by the way, in her time, was very adamant about not being referred to as the minority leader when she was out of the majority, but instead to be the Democratic leader. And it's like, grow up, okay? You lost. You may win, and she did win the next time. But anyway, your thoughts on the Chicago hot dog?
Neutral. I have no strong feelings. I feel much more strongly about Anita Dunn and revenge.
Chicago hot dog, overrated. Sorry, Chicago.
What even is that really?
So it's Chicagoans can feel free to write in to correct me, but it is a poppy seed roll.
I like that.
A Vienna beef frank, which is not my favorite frank. I'm
into it so far. I like all of this.
A quarter of a dill pickle.
Okay. I love this Chicago dog.
Some sort of a mild but whole pickled pepper. There is a shocking toxic green slaw relish that is popular. Tomato slices. It's a lot. Yeah. So they call it drag through the garden, I believe.
Mm-mm.
And
the big thing is no ketchup.
Oh,
well,
no, not for me.
Yeah, no ketchup.
I do like the poppy seed roll and the quarter of a pickle, though.
I have love in my heart for all the kinds of frankfurters that we enjoy in this nation, and that's good. I, of course, am partial to the West Virginia hot dog with spicy sauce, meat sauce, and coleslaw, white onions, and yellow mustard. And ketchup should not be involved for my tastes, but the Chicago dog feels complicated for its own sake.
Yeah, I don't think I'm into it. Do you want to talk about patriotism is cool?
So this is the most interesting part for me. And this marries up with the anti-Semitism. And I don't know whether I said it on this podcast or in one of my many, many utterances, but when the USA chants started at the Democratic, the first USA chants that we heard from Democrats were to shout down protesters at a Kamala Harris rally. And I thought, what? Okay. And this convention has been the most patriotic Democratic convention that I can recall. I cannot recall a Democrat, and perhaps we could go back and we could look at Democratic conventions from the turn of the century and find that they were even more patriotic, but certainly compared to 2020, certainly compared to 2016, certainly this is a star-spangled spectacular with the Pledge of Allegiance and singing the national anthem and USA chants and holding up signs that say USA. And I think the Democrats, one of the motifs of the speeches, Michelle Obama talked about, you can't be like Goldilocks. In 2020, Barack Obama's speech, which he gave from the National Constitution Center, was pleading with the progressive left to not sit on their hands. And he said, basically, it's an imperfect system, I know, but it's the best we've got. This is our best chance. Please stay in the fight, and then we can address the many problems. And Democrats, since, I don't know when the 1619 Project came out, but the story of the Democratic Party has been one in which the often shallow patriotism of Donald Trump, and we've always had this patriotism gap between Republicans and Democrats, but the Democrats really leaned into, in the past decade, what's wrong with America. We can think back to the infamous line from Michelle Obama, this is the first time in my adult life that I'm actually proud of my country, and all of that. And I think it has finally occurred to Democrats that voters want to be patriotic, that voters want to love America, and that talking about America as problematic is not appealing to voters. And what they did was let Donald Trump and the Republicans steal the whole issue, right? Take the whole thing. And I saw a Democratic Party that wants to win and was willing to express an unalloyed love of America in order to try to do that.
Well, the Obamas saying, "Don't be Goldilocks," is just telling the protesters to shut the F up.
Right. Don't let the perfect get in the way of the good. You shut up. You go vote for Kamala Harris, and we can talk about that after the election.
Yeah,
we can
and
talk about your
shut your
complaints
trap.
later. Yep.
As the specter of these protests has been cast over this convention.
Were you surprised to see the hostage parents get a speaking slot at the DNC? I was surprised.
Well, if they wanted to speak there, I think it would have been a huge scandal if they were denied a slot. Huge.
Well, I guess they could have put him at 1 p.m. on Monday or something.
I think it would have been quite damaging. So, but I was surprised, and then I think there was obvious relief that they were received warmly, particularly given that every Jewish event, and we've been covering this at Beacon, including J Street is a far left Jewish organization that is not pro-Israel. The J Street rabbi spoke at a Jewish Democratic Council of America event. Every event that has had anything to do with Israel has had a two-step registration system where the location is not public because they are concerned about security. And as our friend Park McDougall, the tablet, observed, like there's a way in which Democrats are hiding from their own people at this event. And so I was surprised by that.
And in an interview after their speech with my colleague Chris Cuomo, the Polin and Goldberg said that they had been warned, right, to expect blowback, that they had been warned and that they were worried that they would get up on that stage and start talking and that there would be protests and there would be denunciations. And what they got instead was the same chant that a hostage family at the Republican National Committee got, which was bring them home. And I think part of it is calculation, but another part is revulsion among Democrats at seeing what these protests have been about. I think Democrats are more anti-war as a category. And
where have they been for the past year?
Well, it took time, is my point, that the revulsion at these protests, that at the beginning, Democrats have more tolerance for protests. They're more anti-war than Republicans. They're more prone to be sympathetic to allegations of settler colonialism and all of that stuff. But the protesters finally, it broke down even among progressives, finally broke down the sympathy. And it's like, holy cannoli, what do you want from us? What do you want? And I think this is an entirely healthy reaction.
Well, I think there's another aspect to this. Why were they received warmly? Well, they went on stage and called for a ceasefire and to bring the hostages home. That's actually like not that different from what the protesters are calling for. They want a ceasefire now. And had somebody gone on stage and said Israel needs to win this war and fight for until, Hamas is completely defeated, I'm not sure how that would have been received. But their message actually was not controversial. It's pretty hard to boo people whose 23-year-old son, they flashed his pictures on the Jumbotron there. Pretty hard to boo people who are saying that.
Well, certainly.
And by the way, a lot of people would take issue with like, hey, we need a ceasefire and bring the hostages home now.
Certainly, I can imagine a scenario in which, so the uncommitted, the pro-Palestinian faction from Michigan and some from Minnesota, the uncommitted folks were denied a speaking slot. Here's how I'll put it. Had Joe Biden been the nominee, I think the chance of these folks getting booed would have been substantial. because Democrats were so afraid of these Arab and pro-Palestinian voters in Michigan that they were acceding to their extravagant demands. And they were so afraid of them and the narrowness in Michigan. But now I think they feel like they can say, you know what? No, you don't get a speaking spot. No, your protest area is 2 miles away. No, we're not doing it. But I can certainly imagine a world in which that uncontroversial message would have been booed and Democrats would have tolerated it. And we would have heard the uncommitted faction with a speaking slot at the DNC. And we would have had do you remember when in 2012, the Democratic convention was racked by conflict over the Jerusalem being the capital of Israel?
Of course.
So I can certainly imagine a story in which Joe Biden's the nominee and this convention was racked by these sorts of issues because of Biden's weakness and the anxiety that Democrats who did not have fellow feeling with the uncommitted faction had, because they would be afraid of offending them because they had become convinced that 15,000 pro-Palestinian voters in Michigan were going to cost them the election.
Shall we discuss the Judy Woodruff snafu?
Well, get it? It starts with Axios.
Go ahead.
Well, Judy Woodruff got it wrong because Axios got it wrong first. She was leaning on Axios in her error, is all I'm saying.
So Axios reported that Donald Trump had spoken with Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu's office, and they had talked about delaying a ceasefire deal until after the election in order to damage Kamala Harris's chances. And
story has been updated to reflect that Netanyahu's office denied a phone call took place on Wednesday between the Israeli Prime Minister and former President Trump. But other than that, it was perfect. Perfect phone call.
Yeah, they have a new report that Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu's office said in a statement Thursday that he did not speak with former President Donald Trump on Wednesday to discuss the Gaza hostage and ceasefire deals. Axios earlier reported that Trump spoke on the phone with Netanyahu on Wednesday and discussed the Gaza hostage and ceasefire deal, citing 2 U.S. sources who were briefed on the call. And going on the initial Axios report, Judy Woodruff spoke about this on air, and she essentially repeated the story, and she has now apologized. So Politico reports that veteran PBS correspondent Judy Woodruff apologized on Wednesday for comments she had made on the air regarding former President Donald Trump and negotiations for a ceasefire in Gaza between Israel and Hamas. Woodruff, during PBS's Democratic National Convention coverage on Monday, repeated a story she had read in Axios and Reuters that Trump had allegedly been encouraging Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu to put off peace talks until after the U.S. election in the belief that a deal could help Democrat Kamala Harris's campaign. But Woodruff said in a post on X Wednesday that she had not seen later reporting that the story had been denied by the Trump campaign and Israel. She said her remarks had not been based on any original reporting on her part. This was a mistake, and I apologize for it.
And I don't doubt at all that Donald Trump hopes that there is not a peace deal between now and the election, but this was funny. This was a just so story. It had to be true. So here we go. It must be true, and it fits our preconceived bias. So let it rip.
And of course, the bias is always in one direction.
Well, certainly not a lot of right wing bias. Not a lot of systematic right wing bias at public broadcasting. That is true.
Well, let's talk about Trump's comments on social media, where he went after Josh Shapiro, who spoke at the convention yesterday, and he said the highly overrated Jewish governor of the great Commonwealth of Pennsylvania, Josh Shapiro, made a really bad and poorly delivered speech talking about freedom and fighting for comrade Kamala Harris for president. He added that she hates Israel. This is about Harris. She hates Israel and will do nothing but make its journey through the complexities of survival as difficult as possible, hoping in the end that it will fail. And he said Shapiro refused to acknowledge that I am the best friend that Israel and the Jewish people ever had.
Well, how did the Jewish I love the Jewish governor is my favorite part, the highly overrated Jewish governor, and so odd that he would decline to praise Donald Trump at the Democratic National Convention. He did not get up and say, before I begin, we're trying to beat him, but let's just a quick round of applause for Donald Trump, the best friend that Israel and the Jewish people have ever had. He's number one. Now let us begin.
What's crazy about this is that the reason Shapiro became a front runner for the vice presidential nomination, of course, was that he has a 61% approval rating in Pennsylvania.
Yes.
And of course, appeals to independent voters. And so savaging him and noting his religion for no reason just seems is foolish.
It's so perfectly Trump, where you're like, oh, okay, so the Democrats are sounding more friendly to Israel. They're quashing. I mean, Doug Emhoff, the husband of Kamala Harris, said that she cooks such a good brisket that it brought him closer to his faith. And okay, so they're doing this, and we got a Pennsylvania issue here. What are we going to do? Make sure to call Josh Shapiro the Jewish governor of Pennsylvania. It's like these poor Republicans, man. They were riding so high, and now we're back in the stepping on rakes phase.
Trump at a rally after the Obama spoke at the convention asks, does he have to stick to policy? It's a funny question because, obviously a rhetorical question. So he says of the Obamas, they always say, he's talking about his campaign managers, they always say, sir, please stick to policy. Don't get personal. And yet they're getting personal all night long, these people. Do I have to stick to policy? And Chris, I got to say, I get it. They are savaging him in very personal ways. I understand his instinct to defend himself.
Well, life
it may not be prudent, but I get it. He's right. Right.
Life is full of hardship.
He's right.
It is unfortunate that we must constrain our baser instincts in order to be of service and to succeed. But I noted it because the drama inside the Trump campaign, they brought back Corey Lewandowski, who is on the interview circuit saying, no, I think Chris LaCivita and Susie Wiles are doing a terrific job. They're doing a terrific job. And Trump is taunting his advisors in public because there's this enormous pressure on Trump now. And you hear it from all the traditional Republicans, from Kevin McCarthy, from Lindsey Graham, from all of the people who are publicly pleading with Trump, please, please, please stop attacking Harris personally. Stop with this stuff. Just we can win on the issues. We can win on the economy. We can win on immigration. Please stick to the issues. And of course, Trump obviously chafes at this. It obviously upsets him. And the coming crack up, and we talked about it at the time that the Atlantic piece came out about LaCivita and Wiles. And I saw it when it came, like, oh no, they are going to get it. And once the race changed and Trump was no longer in the lead, the recriminations and the infighting began. And if you're taunting your own campaign advisors from the rostrum at a campaign event, this is you can mark it here a harbinger of more trouble to come.
Chris, we hear RFK is poised to drop out of the race and potentially to back Trump. What do you think the impact of that will be?
What a dumb media-driven story. Robert F. Kennedy Jr. has been a media darling, a fixation. They hate him. They love to hate him. The right-wing media was obsessed with him. The left-wing media was angry at him. The RFK thing. And you know what he has added up to? Nothing. He has added up to a great lot of nothing. And he's currently rocking a 3% share of the vote. And he went to Democrats. It is reported he went to Democrats and said, I'll drop out of the race. Give me a cabinet post or make a deal with me. And this is, you got to like the chutzpah of a guy who, after his most recent media sensation, was talking to Roseanne Barr about the time he put a dead bear cub in Central Park as a fun prank, that he goes to the Democrats and says, what will you give me to drop out? And the Harris campaign and the Democrats say, nothing. We won't give you anything to drop out, because whatever Democratic votes were being parked with RFK as a protest of Biden in hopes that Biden would leave, they all went to Harris, and he's down there. So then Joe Rogan says, I'm voting RFK. I'm voting RFK. And Trump flips his wig and says, you're going to get booed at the MMA. You can't say that. So now it's the Republicans' turn to be obsessed with RFK. Do you remember when the Biden campaign hosted every living Kennedy at the White House so that they could deny? So now the Republicans are the ones obsessed with
real show of force there.
Now it's the Republicans who are obsessed with the phantom candidacy of Robert F. Kennedy Jr. Well, Robert F. Kennedy Jr. is out of money. He's not on the ballot. So we're recording this Thursday. On Friday, he's going to make an announcement about, I love this guy. He's going to address the American people. Well, right now, I am addressing the American people with almost similar efficacy. The Ink-Stained Wretches podcast is what else but an address to the American people. But this guy who's out of money, who's failed at ballot access, who has been just terrible at this, says, maybe, and his running mate, Nicole Shanahan, on a podcast that looked like it was an ayahuasca retreat, says, yeah, well, we've got two ways forward. We can try to get on the ballot in more places and get 5%. Then maybe we start a movement, or we'll drop out and endorse Trump. Or otherwise you get a Harris presidency. Here's a piece of advice for Republicans. All you have to do with Robert F. Kennedy Jr. is nothing. It's all you have to do. He will probably close his race out anyway. And if you give Robert Kennedy something to get out of the race, whatever you think you're getting in the Joe Rogan community, this very online, very media-driven entity, you lose at least that much by being weird, right? What's the world in which getting these very online dudes to feel better about RFK endorsing Trump? What is the world in which that is worth having to stand on stage with him and say to the voters of suburban Maricopa County, to say to the voters of suburban Atlanta, of suburban Pittsburgh and Philadelphia, to say to normal voters, I tell you who I really like. I like the brainworm guy. Me and the brainworm guy, we've got a big idea for what we're going to do about checks notes. The Food and Drug Administration. It is an example of how very online, very media-driven communities and movements and ideas can defeat rational thinking and strategy in politics. So RFK Jr. is just part of what's next in the election, and what's next in the campaign is the circus, right? The crazy part. Because if we rightly understand that Donald Trump is not going to cede to the wishes of Nikki Haley and Kevin McCarthy and become a disciplined campaigner, I think we know what's next. And what's next is Trump does what Trump does best, which is disrupt, and just keep. And one of the pleas from Democrats from the dais in Chicago has been, don't get distracted. Bill Clinton said it. Everybody said it. They're going to try to divide you. They're going to distract you. Don't get divided. Don't get distracted. And to wit, we have the two stories about what's coming and what Democrats are worried about. And one is a report from Fox Business from Maria Bartiromo, where she's passing on the allegation of that the illegal immigrants are being So she says, from a friend of mine's wife had to take her 16-year-old to the DMV this week for a new license, couldn't get on an online appointment, all full. So the person had to go to 3 DMVs to get something done. First DMV was in Weatherford, Arizona. Had a massive line of immigrants getting licenses and had a tent and table outside the front door of the DMV, registering them to vote, exclamation. So then I guess this is Texas, sorry, not Arizona. And so I guess that's the Fort Worth Star-Telegram, went to go research the story, found that it was not true. There's a media question about the relative merits of Maria Bartiromo passing on unsubstantiated claims about migrant mass voting registration. But there is also this part, which is the frenzy in the Republican Party is only beginning, right? What we saw in 2016 and what Democrats are worried about, and, in part pays off on January 6, 2021, is the conspiracy theories, the claims, the allegations, the stuff is going to get bananas. And part of that, of course, was the Russiagate obsession among Democrats and the fixation on the idea, Hillary Clinton claimed directly or indirectly that Jill Stein, the Green Party candidate, was a Russian malefactor and that cost them the election, that led to the grossly exaggerated claims about Russian involvement in the Trump campaign and all of that stuff. And you can feel the circus is coming to town, right? You can feel what's going to happen next, and it's going to be very challenging. Which brings me to the FBI. This is a report from the New York Times. FBI agents searched the homes of 2 prominent figures with connections to Russian state media: Scott Ritter, a former United Nations weapons inspector,
Pedophile.
and Dimitri Simes.
Just left that out.
Dimitri Simes, an advisor to former President Donald Trump's first presidential campaign. And these gentlemen are contributors to RT, Russia Today, propaganda network that Russia operates in the U.S. And this is just another marker to lay down here that whether it's what Maria Bartiromo is saying or what the New York Times is saying about what Russia is saying or whatever, the churn, the chop on the surface of this election is going to get intense as we get closer. And it would have been true no matter what, but it will be more true with Republicans trailing, because that's where Trump goes. And frankly, it is probably his best opportunity to win the race is to turn it into crazy town, right? He needs a crazy town race. Kamala Harris needs a normal race. And this is the stuff. And so for Democrats, it's always really hard, which is, okay, there's the community on the left that says we need to fight disinformation and misinformation. We need to put down, we need to go after these people. We need to do all this stuff. And then there's the other thing that says, but do we get wrapped around the axle? Do we get distracted from the actual thing? And do we end up fighting it? So this is asymmetrical kind of warfare that Republicans prospered by before, and it's going to be a feature of what's coming. And for the media, covering it is not easy, because it's like, well, is it necessary to fact check Maria Bartiromo's tweets? Is it necessary to obsess over what RT, which no one is watching, is it necessary? Like, so we haven't yet gotten to the Tucker Carlson phase of the election.
I see it a little bit differently. I think the Russia Today stuff is always going to be covered. And I thought the coverage was interesting precisely because of this. They note in the piece, this month, FBI agents searched the homes of Scott Ritter and Dimitri Simes. And then they note, the investigation so far is focused on potential violations of the economic sanctions imposed on Russia. The government's investigation is politically fraught, reprising the furiously partisan debate over Russia's influence in the 2016 presidential campaign. And they note in here that Russia is once again trying to aid Trump. For a third time, according to the officials in public statements, the Kremlin's propaganda apparatus has thrown itself behind Mr. Trump's candidacy, creating online news outlets and fake videos to denigrate President Biden and, more recently, Ms. Harris. That is why I think this Russia Today stuff will always be covered with interest by the mainstream press. And I would note, I talked about this a little bit with Matt Continetti last week. While there is deep interest in the mainstream media of covering Russia's attempts to boost Trump, there is far less interest in covering Iran's efforts to hurt Trump. And inquiry into, well, why is it that Russia's interested, if it is, in a Trump victory, and that Iran wants Trump to lose?
Yes. And foreign, we should just remember, Donald Trump's campaign in 2016 was perhaps not entirely unique, but different than most in its enthusiasm for foreign interference. But foreign interference is a factor in American elections. Other countries take a big interest in what happens in U.S. elections, and that hacking by Iran, the propaganda from Russia, who knows what China's doing through platforms, who knows what all is happening. And that's the fact. This is definitely just a fact of life.
Chris, that brings us to business news, where we have Google's agreement to fund local newsrooms, and what could possibly go wrong.
What could go wrong? What could go wrong?
So Politico notes that Google has brokered a first-in-the-nation deal with California lawmakers to direct millions of dollars to local newsrooms, the latest in a series of global efforts to require tech companies to support the journalism they profit from. The deal would also steer $70 million in private dollars toward the development of artificial intelligence tools through a to-be-established nonprofit, et cetera, et cetera. But the obvious problem is that, I wonder what the coverage of Google would be like in these newsrooms.
I won't say it's the least of my concern. The amazing thing about this piece to me, so you see Google agrees to America's first newsroom funding deal. It's already unpopular. And I thought, oh, okay, so they're going to write a balanced story about the problems of having the state of California arbitrate what journalism is and what journalism isn't. No, that is not why it's unpopular. It's already unpopular because it didn't extract enough money from Google. And it's not hard enough on Google. This blackmail of saying to Google, the idea that the state of California, that the government of the state of California is a player in this relationship of getting money from Google to local newsrooms, not only is distorting, but it raises considerable First Amendment considerations. And so they do it through the journalism school at the University of California at Berkeley. There's a lab that they've got that they're going to sort out what's the good journalism and what's the bad journalism. Who should get this money? Who shouldn't get this money? Who is a sanctioned and authorized recipient of the money that the state of California extorted from Google? And I'm very optimistic about what AI can bring for local news. I think AI could be really, really good. Of all the places where AI could really help, and medical research and lots of places where AI can help, local news is certainly one, because for small staffed, underfunded locations, AI could do a lot of work. I'm very optimistic about what AI can bring for local news. But I am not optimistic that if the fakakta government of California, mirroring a failed effort that was undertaken in Canada and elsewhere, enters in as the arbiter of what journalism should be funded and what journalism shouldn't be funded, the distortions to the market, the concerns about First Amendment expression, and the I'm sure these newsrooms aren't going to be tough on Google. I'm also pretty sure they're not going to be tough on the government of the state of California. This is trouble, trouble, trouble.
Chris, that brings us to our follow-up file where we have the Washington Post reviewing Taylor Lorenz's social media post that called Biden a war criminal. And NPR reports that senior editors of the Washington Post are reviewing a prominent tech columnist's private story on social media, which appears to label President Biden a war criminal. And so this was initially reported by the New York Post's John Levine, and Lorenz wrote back to Levine, "You people will fall for any dumb A edit someone makes," arguing that somebody else had edited her post. And that it wasn't her. A fact check appended to Levine's tweet cited her apparent denial. But, NPR reports, NPR has obtained a screen grab of Lorenz's actual post, which contained that caption. It was not shared with her wider Instagram audience of 143,000 followers. 4 people with direct knowledge of the private Instagram story confirmed its authenticity to NPR. They spoke to NPR on condition of anonymity, and she then removed the picture an hour after circulating it. What I found amusing in the NPR write-up was they say that she has not been a vocal, she says Lorenz has not otherwise been vocal about the Israel-Hamas conflict, which is laughable. She has been very out there talking about this, and so this is absolutely in keeping with other things she had said. It remains to be seen whether this will be her undoing. She's, of course, an extremely undisciplined, irresponsible user of social media.
I was super bummed do you know what Dude Perfect is?
No.
Dude Perfect is a phenomenon of trick shot. They started as trick shot artists 10 years ago, YouTube phenoms, and they've grown into this massive brand that young dudes love to watch the videos of. I have been to a Dude Perfect, I don't know, call it a concert, but my youngest man-child was deeply taken by Dude Perfect. So we watched the ESPN 30 for 30 on Dude Perfect, which was great and interesting and good and well made. The 30 for 30 series is really good. And it was quite interesting. And so they're talking about Dude Perfect, and they're talking to experts. And here's Mark Cuban talking about, because he's from Dallas, and talking about blah, 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 blah. And then it's time for an expert on social media. Who do they get?
Her?
Yep.
Of course.
I was like, oh, I wouldn't know who that person is, but not for my friend Eliana Johnson. And unfortunately, as ESPN was like, who do you get? Somebody who's like a writer about social media. You got anybody? And it's like, how about this person from the Washington Post? And there she was, made me laugh.
Well, that brings us to our style section. And we have Chick-fil-A hatching a plan for a streaming service.
Are you ready for Chick-fil-A streaming TV?
I'm not ready for this. This is a Deadline exclusive. Chick-fil-A moving aggressively into the entertainment space with plans to launch a slate of originals for its own streaming platform. Deadline understands that the fast food firm has been working with a number of major production companies, including some of the studios, to create family-friendly shows, particularly in the unscripted space. It is also in talks to license and acquire content. Okay.
So would this be like Chick-fil-A Plus, that you would watch it at home?
I have no idea.
This is that, it's funny. This is so dumb that it might work.
Oh, it looks like it's on the site. It says it's previously produced content for its own site before including stories of Evergreen Hills.
Oh, so maybe your Chick-fil-A, maybe your people are going to be able to have an immersive Chick-fil-A brand experience. They can eat Chick-fil-A and watch Chick-fil-A TV while they do it. Maybe one day you and I will work for Chick-fil-A News.
I don't think so, Chris.
You don't think? I think I would. I mean, I'm open to it. Call us Chick-fil-A. We could have Wretches on filet. We could have the spicy nug Wretches on filet.
And this one I am deeply interested in. Spanx.
Yeah, you're
founder.
gonna have to decode this whole thing for me because I was overwhelmed.
The founder of Spanx, her name is Sarah Blakely, is introducing stiletto-heeled sneakers called Sneaks. Sneaks, a hybrid stiletto touted on the company's website as a high heel, HY-heel, is the latest invention by entrepreneur Sarah Blakely, the woman behind the billion-dollar brand Spanx, the undergarments worn by the likes of Oprah and Gwyneth Paltrow that took the fashion world by storm in 2000. So these look like Velcro sneakers with a heel. And it says, made in Spain, the shoes feature materials such as Napa leather and Italian mesh and are available in a variety of styles intended for casual and formal wear. It was a long development, a lot of factory development, like 9 to 10 years, Blakely recently told CBS News. And I have to say, like, I'm not going to wear these, but they're kind of cool. And I've heard her talk about how she developed Spanx, and it's totally fascinating. So I would not bet against this woman. So I'm just going to say, like, I'm not lining up to purchase them, but I think these are going to be successful.
Where would one wear a high heeled?
Well, she's wearing a dress. Like, you could wear them to a cocktail party.
I don't understand, but as I say, I will entirely defer to you on this question. Entirely.
I just wouldn't bet against her. I think she's super impressive. Like,
Well,
she can do Spanx. I think she can do high heels because
Right.
those things are really uncomfortable, and I can see this happening.
okay. Oh, so the idea is it looks like a high heel.
It doesn't
it's
really.
comfortable like a
It
sneaker.
looks different. It looks different.
It is definitely beyond my grasp. It is definitely beyond my grasp, but I will keep an open mind.
All right. Up next, we have our obsessions of the week, where we break down the stories that we can't get out of our heads. And Chris, this was covered pretty widely in the mainstream media. The AP covered it, CNN covered it, and the New York Times covered it. Tim Walz has said repeatedly, and he touched on it in his remarks last night, though not quite as directly. He has sent fundraising mail saying, I wouldn't have my family without IVF, and repeatedly talked about, so he sent out a letter that said, my wife and I used IVF to start a family. And in his introductory speech in Philadelphia at Temple University, when Harris introduced him, he said, thank God for IVF. My wife and I have 2 beautiful children. And he's accused Republicans of coming after this because of a law in Alabama that put the procedure at risk. And of course, it's controversial. The process of freezing and discarding embryos is controversial. Folks on the Christian right object to it. Well, it turns out when he was asked to share more about his experience, it came out that he and his wife did not go through IVF. They went through a different procedure known as IUI that is far less invasive and far less expensive. And the campaign said, well, he just talks like a normal person, and people refer to all of this as a whole, IUI and IVF, colloquially as IVF, which I can tell you is not true. And I was sort of gobsmacked by, it was covered, but it was not covered as a lie, which he lied about this. And I think for people who really understand the difference between these procedures, IUI is a cinch, a total cinch. IVF is a long, hard slog. And so to claim you had one when you did the other for political gain is wrong. And the AP notes, the discrepancy on what is considered a deeply personal topic for many families comes as Republicans have been scrambling to poke holes in his biography. But their headline is, Tim Walz has described his family's IVF experience, but they used a different procedure. The CNN headline is Gwen Walls reveals she underwent a different treatment, not IVS, in new details about fertility struggles. And the New York Times headline is Walls' family fertility journey ran not through IVF, but another common treatment. And none of these stories say he lied, he misled, he mischaracterized, which rankles me. And by the way, I also think it's important to note that IUI, which is what they did, is not a politically fraught procedure because it does not involve the creation and destruction of embryos. And
can you
so
explain
totally
can you explain the difference to me?
It's totally non-controversial. So when you go through IUI, you're just essentially placing sperm in like an optimal position to get pregnant. There's no embryo created.
So it
It's
doesn't
very-
it
it's very
doesn't carry
simple. Right. Nobody. It's not controversial. Nobody objects to it. They basically dilute and make sperm like more potent and place it closer to the egg. And IVF is a whole host of other things.
Got it.
So that's my obsession for this week. This is a big lie.
Yeah, and the thing with Walls is there's a pattern.
There's a pattern
about taking advantage of the errors seem to run in his favor. And I don't want to overstate these things, but pattern is hard to miss on this.
Yeah, some are small,
on his military
some are big,
service. Yeah, but there is a.
but they all
there's a
redound
pattern.
to his benefit.
Right. There's a pattern. And I suspect that, in his convention speech, he talked about his military service and he talked about their struggle to conceive. And he didn't duck those. But I was wrong when I said that he would soon need to do an interview and address these allegations or to address these falsehoods and try to clean it up. But he's pushing through. And so we don't, it has to happen eventually though, right? Maybe not. I don't know. Maybe he will just try to fade from the scene and stay on the trail as a battleground state campaigner and just keep doing a loop through Pennsylvania, Michigan, and Wisconsin for the next 2 months. But yeah, there is a pattern.
Chris, what's your obsession?
Well, I know I shouldn't love a story about dead people, but I have been fascinated by the coverage of the super yacht that sank. And the Daily Beast has a great piece. The Wall Street Journal has a great piece. This is like do you remember? No, you probably don't because you're cooler than I am. But there was a story about the balloon. There was a guy was going to do a bungee jump from going to take a balloon into the stratosphere. Or long, long ago, the guy who tightrope walked across between the Twin Towers. Or last year was the Titanic submarine that sank? Was that just last year or was that 2 years?
I feel like it was last year.
So people doing weird, risky, rich person stunt kind of stuff, these things, I'm fascinated by them. And in this case, the story is made more fascinating by it's like Agatha Christie novels of the characters who are on the boat. This billionaire and that super lawyer and this person. And I feel bad for their loved ones, obviously, who are mourning the loss of these people. But as a story and a fascination, I'm obsessed with it. I think it's really interesting and it's generated a bunch of good coverage and I'm here for it.
The Wall Street Journal profile of the lawyer who had just won, he had just helped exonerate the British billionaire Mike Lynch. His name is Chris Morvillo. I'm not sure if I'm pronouncing that right, but the Journal has a profile of him that's phenomenal. It's really, really good. And he was a phenomenally successful attorney. And I just thought it was really, really well done.
Just a lot of good to read in this story. A real good one.
Well, that brings us to my favorite time of the week, which is reader mail. And we have a note from Jerry Bennock, I hope I'm pronouncing that right, from Harrisburg, Pennsylvania, who writes, Eliana and Chris, longtime listener, first-time caller. In your episode, Sparking Joy, you referenced a new dining app which allows the diner to offer a tip before the meal. It may be folklore, I have no source to quote, but I recall hearing an explanation that a tips was actually an acronym. According to this lore, a traveler would tip the proprietor of a tavern or a roadhouse in advance of being served to ensure prompt service. Tips. Perhaps this new dining app has historical significance. A fun story at a minimum. Look forward to next Friday's episode. By the way, bring back Matt as often as you can. I'm a huge fan.
Well, he's right about.
Love it. That's a great story.
He's Mr. Beddock is right about Matthew Continetti, certainly, but wrong about tips being an acronym. A tip is, so this is, I don't know how ancient of a word, but certainly I would say 400 years ago, 500 years ago. And a tip. So what do you call when somebody gives you a lead on a news story? It's a tip. What do you call it when you get a little piece of information, a little something? A tip. It came from criminal argot, came from the language of bounders and the street. And a tip is something, and the way that a tip works is you're doing something kind of on the sly, right? How do you tip people? You think of, if we're talking about Anita Dunn's favorite movie, and you're like a gangster, how do you do it? You fold the bills up in your hand, press it into the other person's palm. Something outside the lines. You're coloring outside the lines. And so the etymology of the word tip is from the same as tip for a news story. It's a little something extra, a little something more, something that seems maybe a little nefarious.
Chris, that brings us to your favorite time of the week, where I am forced to say something nice, but show me how it's done.
Love this story. I love the story from KTLA. Woman sends herself Apple AirTag to catch mail thieves. Tired of being a victim of repeated mail theft, Santa Barbara County woman laid her own trap to catch those responsible for ripping her off. The unidentified woman kept a mailbox at the Los Alamos post office in the Sierra Santa Maria Valley and had been the victim of mail theft on multiple occasions. To stop the thefts once and for all, the woman decided to ship herself an Apple AirTag, a small keychain. On Monday, sheriff's deputies responded to the post office, met the woman after her mail was stolen again. AirTag was included, now able to track the thieves. Deputies traveled to Santa Maria, where they located the suspect and the victim's stolen mail, tracking device and all. I love it. They arrested a 27-year-old named Virginia Francesca Lara of Santa Maria and 37-year-old Donald Ashton Terry of Riverside. They were both booked. They were both arrested and being held on $50,000 bail. Way to go. I love it.
All right. My favorite is this New York Post piece indicating that if you didn't familiarize yourself during the Olympics with Pommel Horse Guy, he's an American gymnast who is such an adorable, dorky guy who wears glasses and dresses like a total dork. This guy's wearing like a solid colored burgundy button-up shirt. And his expressions of glee during the Olympics they went viral. They became memes and everyone was calling him Pommel Horse Guy. So we learned that Pommel Horse Guy is going to be on Dancing with the Stars. And he said I believe it was on CBS this morning. No, he appeared on Good Morning America to share the news. And he said, I want to do some flares. He wants to bring some of that gymnastics, maybe a backflip or a handstand. I want to have fun with it, he said. Nadora Schick was also asked if he plans to dance with his glasses on. I might have fun with it, he said. I'm scared they'll fly off is a thing. Maybe we can do a gadget to keep them on. Maybe a new pair of glasses to match the theme. That's what I'm thinking. That would be awesome. The Olympian immediately said yes to doing the show when he was called. I'm very excited, he added. So I cannot wait to watch Pommel Horse Guy on Dancing with the Stars. He was great. He was so, so cute on the Olympics. And he did a pommel horse routine basically on the floor of Good Morning America.
I love it. There you go. I'm for him. I don't know him.
Yeah,
I didn't
that
watch
was
him, but
uplifting.
I'm for him. There you go. I'm for
He was
uplifting.
great. He was great. That is all the time we have for the news about the news. If you have a story you want us to talk about, email us at wretches@nebulouspodcast.com. That's wretches@nebulouspodcast.com, and sign up for our newsletter at nebulouspodcasts.com. This has been Ink Stained Wretches from Nebulous Media, produced by Colin Chicola. Find us on iTunes or wherever you get your podcasts. Just search for Wretches.